can see.
Okay, today's drug expert is on canagliflozin. We all know it's an SGLT2 inhibitor, and the SGLT2 full form is like sodium glucose linked co-transport inhibitor, basically. Sodium glucose co-transport inhibitor also it's also called. And brand name is Invokana, only one brand as of now. It's recently approved by FDA in 2014, and two strengths are available: 100 mg and 300 mg, and various combination with metformin is also available for this canagliflozin. And cost of this tablet is 545 rupees for 10 tablets, which is 100 mg tablet, and for 300 mg it's costing around 1200 rupees for 10 tablets. And various combinations with metformin are available under the brand name of Invocamet, and it's 50 mg of canagliflozin and 500 mg of metformin, or 150 mg of canagliflozin and 500 mg of metformin, and 150 mg of canagliflozin and 850 mg of metformin, and 50 mg, and likewise it's in the presentation, you can see that. And various indications for this is like type 2 diabetes mellitus is the main indication, only prescribed indication, basically. And it's not used like first line therapy, only when the blood glucose levels are not controlled with the first line therapy which are being used, like maybe metformin or glimepiride or water other drugs. Only then it's added to the present which are therapy it's on. Basically it's used in combination. They can also use it in monotherapy, but because these are relevantly newer drugs and no long term safety established, so they're not used like monotherapy. And patients with who are obese and with type 2 diabetes mellitus, and this is mainly preferred, and decreased risk of cardiovascular complications in patients with type 2 diabetes mellitus. Mainly empagliflozin is associated with decrease in morbidity and mortality in view of cardiovascular events. Different dosage forms available for adults are like 100 mg and 300 mg, as I said. And it's taken in the morning, once daily dosing in the morning with the first meal. Before or after the meal, it's the same. It can be taken with or without the meal. And if glycemic control is not achieved, it can go doses can be increased up to 300 mg if the GFR is more than 60 ml per minute. And pediatric, no safety and efficacy studies have been observed done yet. And pregnancy category C is there for canagliflozin. And dose adjustment for hepatic doses, mild to moderate, no dose adjustment is required. And severe hepatic impairment use is not recommended, basically, for severe hepatic impairment. And renal dosing for EGFR more than 60 ml per minute, no dose adjustment is required. For EGFR 45 to 60 ml per minute, dose should not exceed 100 mg. And for with GFR of 30 to 45 per minute with albuminuria more than 300 mg per day, dose should not be exceeding 100 mg like previous one. And for EGFR less than 30 mg per minute, use is contraindicated. And patients with dialysis also, the use of this drug is contraindicated. And kinetics of this drug are like 60% bioavailability when taken orally, and metabolism through glucuronidation by UGT1A9 and UGT2B4, which are major enzymes, and which is major part of metabolism of this drug involved. And also by cytochrome enzymes, which is only 7%. And volume of distribution of this drug is 83.5 liters, 99% protein bound, that is to albumin. Elimination through feces and urine. Half-life is 10.6 hours to 13.1 hours. And before directly going into the mechanism, I'll just tell about like the physiology, normal physiology of glucose reabsorption in the nephrons, basically. Like in the Bowman's capsule, basically, like in the Bowman's capsule, the glucose is freely filtered. Okay. In the Bowman's capsule, glucose is freely filtered, and in the proximal convolutant tubule, there are SGLT receptors, which are responsible for the reabsorption of glucose. And there are two segments. Basically in the initial segment of proximal convolutant tubule, there are SGLT2 receptors present, and in the later segment there is SGLT1. SGLT2 are like more low affinity but high capacity. Basically, 90% of glucose will be reabsorbed by the SGLT2 receptors, and only 10% of the glucose will be reabsorbed by the SGLT1 receptor into the renal capillaries. And also talking about the location of other places where these SGLT receptors are present is like GIT. In GIT also, in the duodenum part, SGLT1 receptor is present, which is responsible for the glucose absorption, which we taken through the food. And talking about renal threshold of glucose reabsorption also, like basically like in when the patients are not on this gliflozins also, we observe some patients with glucosuria. The basic mechanism behind that is like glucose uh, like when glucose exceeds its limit, basically when it's more than 180 mg per dl, the renal threshold, it exceeds the renal threshold. Basically after 180 mg per dl in the body, in most of the type 2 diabetic patients, glucose starts appearing in the urine. And when these drugs are taken, when gliflozins are taken, basically the renal threshold decreases, thereby excreting the excess of glucose into the urine. And also it also causes, as I said, it's sodium glucose link co-transport. So natriuresis also will occur, which also precipitates the diuresis. Osmotic drag of water will be present. And here, if you can see, this is the intestinal part. Sorry. Yeah. This is the intestinal lining where, just a moment. Here SGLT1 receptors are present, and this is in the renal proximal convoluted tubule of renal. And here SGLT2, not SGLT1, and this would be the SGLT1 receptor. And as I said, the initial segment of proximal convoluted tubule has SGLT2, and the later will have the SGLT1. Here it's ultra written. But coming to the mechanism of normal physiology, basically what happens is initially in the basolateral side of the membrane of the proximal convoluted tubule, like if you see this part, it's the into the lumen of the capsule. Mm. And yeah, this is the lumen of the nephron. And when you come to the basolateral membrane, there is sodium potassium ATPase pump, which causes reabsorption of three and sodium molecules, and two potassium molecules gets in. And due to that, sodium concentration within the cells of the nephron, that is the proximal convoluted tubule, gets decreased. So which causes activation of this SGLT2 receptor, and thereby like sodium potassium ATPases will be the primary active transport. And when the sodium in urine gets reabsorbed into the cell through SGLT2 inhibitors, that will be facilitated diffusion, basically because the concentration of sodium within the cell is low because um, of reabsorption with the help of sodium potassium ATPases. And thereby this channel gets activated, and then this channel works along with glucose. And so when two sodium molecules are getting into the cell, and along with the glucose, sodium will be the facilitated diffusion, and glucose will be like secondary active transport. Basically once glucose enters into the cell, and through GLUT2, the glucose will be reabsorbed into the renal capillaries and thereby into the blood circulation. And when you come to the later part of the nephron, like proximal convoluted tubule, second and third segments, it will be SGLT1 receptor, and the same follows. And for SGLT1, there will be GLUT1, and for SGLT2, there will be GLUT2 molecules present. Unbound drug, when it passes freely through the glomerulus, it binds to the SGLT2 receptors and it inhibits them so that no glucose and so no glucose is reabsorbed into the body and excreted into urine. And as I said, when glucose is present, in the presence of glucose, only sodium exchange will happen. So that is also inhibited after blocking the SGLT2 receptor. And so natriuresis also occurs. These both are lead to precipitation of diuresis, and glucose causes leading to decrease in blood glucose levels. Renal threshold also will decrease for glucose reabsorption. Actually, the glucosuria starts. Glucose in the urine starts appearing after when the blood glucose levels exceed 180 to 200 mg per dl in normal uh, patients. And when these drugs are used, the threshold will fall up to 80 mg per dl. Thereby, like whenever the glucose is above 80 mg per dl, like the reabsorption of this glucose will be inhibited and excreted through urine. And the chance of hypoglycemia is less when compared to other OHs, because as I said here, like 60 mg, when it falls below 60 mg per dl, the glucose reabsorption will be like the SGLT2 inhibitors will not work effectively, and then preventing the hypoglycemia. Once the blood glucose is below 80 mg per dl, the glucose will be reabsorbed, so hypoglycemia will not be occurred. And adverse effects include female genital mycotic infection, fungal infections, and UTI of incidence of 4.5 to 6%, and increased urinary frequency like diuresis will be happening. Male genital mycotic infections and thirst, constipation, nausea, AKI, which is precipitated by hypovolemia, and ketoacidosis. This is like not like hyperglycemic or hypoglycemic ketoacidosis. This is euglycemic ketoacidosis, and angioedema, anaphylaxis, hypotension, low risk of lower limb amputations, low. Sorry, not lower risk, it's like lower limb amputation risk basically. And hypokalemia, fractures, because of increased risk of fall with syncope. Basically, when hypovolemia occurs, the systolic blood pressure also drops, and thereby chance of depletion related events such as syncope, dizziness all increases, and thereby risk of fall also increases. And it also interferes with parathyroid hormone and vitamin D metabolism, which is not clearly done. Mechanisms of this are not clearly established, and interactions with this canagliflozin is like, which are the drugs which increase the metabolism of this which are the UGT enzymes like rifampicin and antiretroviral and some phenytoin carbamazepine are all the inducers of UGT enzyme, which is majorly responsible for metabolism of gliflozins. And some other interactions with this canagliflozin is like P-glycoprotein inhibited by canagliflozin can increase the risk of digoxin concentration when used in patients with who are on digoxin therapy. And potassium sparing diuretics and other diuretics basically cause the hypovolemia, excessive diuresis, and when especially potassium sparing diuretics, whereas canagliflozin also has chance of hyperkalemia, the risk of incidence of hyperkalemia will be increased. And patient information, regular checks on glucose is required following the diabetic diet. Check your feed regularly, drink a lot of water, observe signs for dehydration as lightheaded, dizzy, and fainting, passing out little or no urine, and fast heart rate. And monitor the signs of ketoacidosis such as sweet smell of your breath, sweet smell of your sweet or metallic taste, and different order in urine, weight loss. Check your kidney functions. And this is the end of my presentation. And also I like to tell about like ketoacidosis in specific. When I mentioned about euglycemic ketoacidosis, basically ketoacidosis is like in our when are there is no proper glucose in our body. Basically, when in the times of starvation, the insulin also will fall down when in the fat adipose tissue, like hormone sensitive lipase will be present, which will be inhibited by insulin, and at the same time which will be activated by glucagon and epinephrine, all the other things, all the other stuff. And when at the times of starvation we don't have enough glucose, and insulin also will not be produced, so thereby the glucagon will be increasing and leading to release of free fatty acids into the bloodstream, and liver takes up the free fatty acids and produces the ketone bodies, leading to ketoacidosis. And one more type of ketoacidosis, like in case of diabetic patients, it is diabetic ketoacidosis. That the other one which is talked about is starvation ketoacidosis, and in case of diabetic patients, it is diabetic ketoacidosis, which in it is like uh, same like the previous one, but the thing is like hyperglycemic ketoacidosis will be present here. In the previous one, hypoglycemic. In diabetic ketoacidosis, it will be like hyperglycemic ketoacidosis. But when you come to euglycemic, why euglycemic is like the chance of undetected ketoacidosis is high, because like when there is no hyperglycemia, they don't usually suspect for ketoacidosis. And when these drugs are taken, the blood glucose will be maintained around 80 mg per dl. So the chance of euglycemic ketoacidosis incidents are high. And that comes to end of my presentation. Any doubts can be asked. And also, yeah,
I have a doubt.
yeah.
Does this canagliflozin has any effect on uric acid? Because I remember when Sharavanan sir telling that in case of patients who are diabetic and who are diagnosed with gout, canagliflozin should not be like prescribed.
Basically, it's EGF. It increases the creatinine values and decreases the EGFR. So uric acid levels may be increased in that cases. And these are the
Uh,
sorry.
okay, okay. Nothing, carry on.
Okay. And just a moment.
Shrikant, hello.
Sharat, tell me, Sharat.
What's the mechanism behind canagliflozin induced amputation risk? Is it related to hypovolemia?
No,
Big blood
amputation risk.
supply is ready.
Not sure about the Sharat. Moreover, I found the mechanism exactly. Exact mechanism I didn't find it. For fracture,
Okay.
risk of fall, and the stuff I found the mechanism, but risk of amputation read it in many places, but I didn't find the exact mechanism. If you see the ADA guidelines, these are the ADA guidelines for which, like it basically includes all the drugs specifying about
Okay.
SGLT2 inhibitor.
Huh.
As I spoke about the weight loss, so it also has the instance of weight loss, because when glucose is excreted into urine, the basically the carbohydrate and the calories which are being excreted. So weight loss will be present with the use of SGLT2 inhibitors. And cardiovascular events, and with atherosclerotic related cardiovascular events, empagliflozin is found to be prominently used. I mean, full, and canagliflozin also to some extent. And with congestive heart failure, empagliflozin and canagliflozin are used. And only oral routes are present, only tablets. And with CKD and progressive CKD, like canagliflozin can be used with the dosage adjustment which you mentioned above, and empagliflozin also. And black box warning additionally, like the risk of amputation which I mentioned earlier, bone fractures also, diabetic ketoacidosis, genital infections, and risk of organ depletion events. And it also basically these SGLT2 inhibitors also have an in like it also have a useful use in their hypertensive patients. Basically how it works is like it decreases the systolic blood pressure and not the diastolic blood pressure. We all know that systolic blood pressure is directly linked to the like cardiac output and the like just a moment. Mm. Like when how systolic blood pressure is maintained is like vasoconstriction and cardiac output, and whereas diastolic blood pressure only through vasoconstriction mechanisms. And what happens in systolic blood pressure when you take gliflozin is like almost 10 mm, I mean 5 to 6 mm of Hg difference will be present in systolic blood pressure. falling systolic blood pressure is observed. And the mechanism for this is like when excess of diuresis is present, blood volume reduction will be there, and reduced venous return to the heart, and reducing the ventricular filling, leading to reduced diastolic volume, which in turn affects the cardiac output, net cardiac output, leading to a decrease in the systolic blood pressure. This is a mechanism of falling systolic blood pressure. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Anything else, any other doubts? Thing can be asked.
Stop recording, man. Shekhar.
Yes, sir.